Snow White, the princess of pure heart. Long ago, in a kingdom covered by snow-capped mountains and silver forests, a queen sat by her window, sewing on a cold winter's day. As she sewed, she pricked her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell on the white snow outside. She looked at the crimson spots and whispered, "If only I could have a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the ebony wood of this window frame." Not long after, her wish came true. The queen gave birth to a beautiful baby girl with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. They named her Snow White. But joy turned to sorrow when the queen grew ill and passed away, leaving the king heartbroken. The kingdom mourned, and Snow White grew up surrounded by kindness, grace, and the love of her people. Years passed, and the king remarried a beautiful woman from a faraway land. She was proud, clever, and elegant, but her heart was cold as ice. She owned a magical mirror, which she often asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And the mirror would answer, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." Hearing that pleased her, for vanity was her greatest weakness. But deep inside, she feared losing her beauty, and that fear would soon turn to jealousy. As years passed, Snow White blossomed into a young woman whose beauty outshone everyone in the kingdom. She was gentle, loved to help the gardeners grow flowers, and often sang with the birds that perched on her windowsill. Her stepmother watched her with envy. Every day, she would ask her mirror the same question, until one morning, it answered differently. "My queen, you are fair, it is true, but Snow White is fairer than you." The queen's heart turned to stone. Her jealousy burned brighter than fire. From that moment, she could not bear to see Snow White's face. One day, the queen summoned her royal huntsman. "Take Snow White deep into the forest," she commanded coldly. "Kill her and bring me her heart as proof." The huntsman, trembling, obeyed. He led Snow White far into the dark forest. When they reached a lonely clearing, she turned to him, her eyes wide with fear. "Why are you so sad, kind sir?" she asked. He dropped his knife, tears falling down his face. "I cannot harm you, my princess. Run, far and fast. The queen wishes you dead." Snow White gasped, then ran into the forest, the trees closing around her like shadows. The huntsman, in guilt and mercy, killed a wild boar and brought its heart to the queen instead. Snow White ran until her legs trembled. Strange eyes glowed between the trees. Branches clawed at her cloak. She stumbled, fell, and wept beneath a towering oak. "Oh, where shall I go? What shall I do?" she whispered. But the forest was kind to her. Soft creatures appeared, rabbits, deer, and birds. They circled around her, as if to comfort her. Guided by their gentle presence, Snow White followed a narrow path until she reached a tiny cottage hidden beneath a hill of moss. Snow White knocked on the door. No one answered. She peeked inside and saw 7 tiny chairs, 7 little plates, and 7 small beds. Everything was neat but dusty. She sighed softly. Perhaps kind people live here. Too tired to think, she cleaned the dishes, swept the floor, and made a small meal. Afterward, she lay down across the 7 beds, falling fast asleep. That night, 7 dwarfs returned from the mines, singing cheerfully, "Hey ho, hey ho, it's home from work we go." When they saw the tidy room and the sleeping girl, they gasped. "Who could this be?" asked Doc, the eldest. "She's lovely," whispered Bashful. "Maybe she's a fairy," said Dopey, eyes wide. When Snow White awoke, she sat up startled, but saw their kind faces. She smiled and explained everything: her stepmother's cruelty, her escape, and her fear. The dwarves nodded solemnly. "Stay with us," said Grumpy, despite his frown. "You'll be safe here." And so she did. She helped with chores, cooked warm meals, and filled the cottage with laughter and song. Meanwhile, the queen again stood before her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" The mirror replied, "My queen, you are fair, it is true, but Snow White still lives, fairer than you." The queen's rage shook the castle. "Alive? Then I shall finish it myself." The next morning, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman. She filled her basket with laces and ribbons, then set off for the forest. When Snow White answered the door, the woman smiled sweetly. "Pretty laces for a lovely girl." Snow White, kind as always, let her in. The woman tied a bright lace around her waist, then pulled it tight, too tight. Snow White gasped and fell to the floor. But when the dwarfs returned, they loosened the lace and saved her. "Beware of strangers," they warned. The queen returned to her mirror. Once more, it told her that Snow White lived. Furious, she brewed a dark potion, dipped an apple into it, and watched one side turn blood red, the other as pale as milk. "One bite and she sleeps forever," the queen whispered. Disguised as a peasant woman, she returned to the forest. Snow White hesitated when she knocked. "Don't be afraid, dear," said the woman. "I only offer you this perfect apple. Take a bite and wish for happiness." Snow White took the apple and bit into it. At once she fell, the apple rolling from her hand. When the dwarfs found her, they wept. Believing her dead, they placed her in a glass coffin deep in the forest, surrounded by flowers. Seasons changed. Winter snow melted into spring blossoms, and still Snow White slept, her face peaceful as a dream. Birds sang near her, and the animals often gathered to watch over her. One day, a prince riding through the forest saw the coffin. He stopped, breath caught. "She is the most beautiful maiden I have ever seen," he said. He lifted the lid and gently kissed her forehead. Then, as if by miracle, Snow White opened her eyes. The poison apple dislodged from her throat, and she breathed again. The dwarfs cheered, the forest glowed with light, and Snow White smiled through her tears. The prince took Snow White to his castle, where bells rang in celebration. The dwarfs were honored guests, and flowers filled every hall. As for the wicked queen, when she asked her mirror once again, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" the mirror replied, "Snow White, who lives in joy and love, is fairer than all." The queen's jealousy faded into dust, and peace returned to the kingdom. Snow White ruled beside her prince, with kindness and grace, and every evening she watched the sunset from her balcony, grateful for life, love, and the light that never faded. And so she lived, gentle, wise, and pure, forever known as Snow White, the princess of the pure heart. The end.